What's up guys, Brady Figueroa coming at you with another one of my favorite albums, and today we are talking about Myles Kennedy's amazing debut solo album, Year of the Tiger, that was released way back in March of 2018. This is an album where, it's just so important to me in multiple different ways, all of which I'll be discussing in this video, but the main one that I'm definitely going to be focusing on is that I seriously give this album credit for broadening my musical horizons, especially at the time back in 2018 when it came out. Around that time back in 2018 is when I was kind of scratching the surface into becoming a full-fledged metalhead and eventually extreme metal fan. And at that point, I really was only listening to hard rock and metal. Going off of that, Alter Bridge was and still is my personal favorite band. I've actually done favorite albums videos for both Blackbird and Fortress, which I'll put in the suggestion cards for this video. And I also reviewed Myles' newest solo album, The Art of Letting Go, that came out last year, so I'll put that in the suggestion cards as well, which will pop up at some point in the video. But I digress. The credit I give to this album is that it really broadened my musical tastes into some more non-rock and metal-esque genres, essentially. Because at the time, literally what this album was for me was one of my absolute favorite musicians and songwriters, period, getting full creative freedom without genre restrictions or expectations of any kind, and then making an album that was a significant departure than the music I had come to know from him in Alter Bridge and also Slash, which is not just alternative and acoustic rock, but has prominent elements of folk, blues, maybe a little jazz, and even a little country at times. This album manages to have so many different musical genres mixed-matched together, but yet it is still so rock-solid and cohesive and forward-thinking. So I'll be complimenting this album a lot throughout this video, but the single greatest compliment I can give this album is that I'm honestly not sure if any other album, period, has opened my mind up, especially at the time, to these styles of music, which otherwise I'm not sure if I'd ever be able to get into. As you can see by my content, I really don't venture outside the world of rock or metal at all in my musical tastes. That's just how I am. And in terms of albums that I really love and favorite albums that I'll be discussing on this channel, I'd probably comfortably put this album somewhere in my top 20-25 albums of all time. And it is by far the only one in that group of albums that sounds remotely close to how this album sounds. So huge props to Myles on that front, and that is something that, regardless of all the other compliments I'm going to give this album, something I will always respect and appreciate about it. Now, getting into specifics here. What specifically do I enjoy as far as actually listening to this album? I mean, short answer, everything, but that's not very specific. I guess one overarching theme that I enjoy a lot about this album, and it manifests itself in multiple different ways, is just the overall soundscapes and imagery that a lot of these songs kind of convey. For one, the more folky and kind of country-esque style songs on here definitely bring to mind lots of rural imagery, and as somebody who lives in the suburbs of Chicago where it's not exactly very rural, listening to songs like Blind Faith and Devil on the Wall, which are a little bit more up-tempo, definitely gives me some much-needed escapism, I guess. And then there's the more calmer, more somber-esque songs on here. Ghost of Shangri-La is probably the most country-type song on here. But hearing those bubbly guitars in the intro, I hear that and I want to go outside. It just gives me clear imagery of this rural landscape walking along a river or something. Songbird and One Fine Day, the last two tracks on here, also kind of have similar vibes to them in a sense that they're a lot more melodic, first of all, just in the overall sound. But there's just some really genuinely heartwarming and emotive melodies in these songs. An absolute favorite song of mine on here that does that as well is the track Turning Stones. With that, again, kind of country-leaning acoustic guitar intro, and then Myles' very somber and delicate yet somewhat layered vocals. That intro just gives me chills every single time I hear it. It's just absolutely beautiful. Then you have a track like Haunted by Design, which is also really folky and a bit more stripped down, but it has some darker undertones to it. And this just goes to show how clear this album paints its imagery, because with this song, I get almost those same images that I was describing, but now it's cloudy. I know that's really specific, and maybe it shows how much I really take music and create imagery out of it. But I don't think I'd be able to do that at all if these songs just weren't as good as they are. So those elements of escapism are very much a huge driving factor into my enjoyment of this album. But my favorite tracks on here are the ones that actually are different and go for some more different moods or soundscapes, like The Great Beyond, which has just this absolute tower of a main chord progression, and again, it's a bit more up-tempo. There's some more intense sounding drums in this song. They aren't really as stripped back as on the majority of the record. Probably the most rock-leaning song on here, which might have been why I loved it so much when it came out, but even now, as much as I love the entire record, this is still a highlight for me. The melodies in this song almost sound like exotic, would be a good way to put it. There's also some awesome up and down dynamics in the song because the verses are very calm and subdued, but they're kind of building tension a little bit, and then Myles lets out that crazy high note to lead into that main chord progression again. And then the bridge of this song might be the overall climax of it still, somehow, even after all those parts so far, with just these cascading melodies that really just feel like an avalanche is coming down on you. I also love how Myles digs a bit into his lower register in the bridge of that song too. Just the range in Myles' voice is perfectly showcased in just this song alone. Then you have my favorite track on the album, and probably my favorite Myles solo song, period, which is Love Can Only Heal. Another song that has some pretty prominent, exotic type melodies. In this case, they sound a bit more mysterious, just with that kind of almost slightly doomy intro. This song is just an absolute masterpiece. I can't express that enough, honestly. The way it builds is just absolute perfection. The way it starts with Myles' really delicate vocals, especially in that first chorus, and then the tension just keeps on building before it kind of all drops out for the second chorus, where Myles kind of goes even more melodic and more delicate. And then that build up when the guitars kick back in and you get those kind of distant sounding drums in the background. Then there's that explosive drum fill right before it kicks in that sounds like it could have been ripped right off of Fortress, production style, everything. And yeah, it kicks back in, and then there's those vocal melodies which sound amazing, but the absolute pinnacle of this entire fucking album is that guitar solo that actually finishes the song. This album has literally been out for just over 7 years, and that guitar solo blows me away every single time I hear it. What makes it so special to me personally is because I'm not a big lead guitar nerd. In general, guitar solos don't do a whole lot for me. But when a solo can have genuine emotion to it and great melodies that match the overall mood of the song, when it can feel like it's supporting the overall song rather than just trying to kind of sound flashy, and when it can actually advance the song and feel like an integral piece of the song rather than it just feeling indulgent. All of those qualities are perfectly represented in this guitar solo. The melodies perfectly fit the song. It is amazingly performed, amazingly mixed and produced, which is something I haven't even talked about yet on this album. It's just perfection. And it's the perfect way to end this song, which also in itself is just perfection as well. Musically, I also single out the title track for also having some kind of exotic type melodies. There's those kind of tribal drum beats that drive the song forward most of the time. As far as just the music so far, I think the only songs I haven't discussed yet are Mother, which is another one that leans kind of a bit more folky and sort of country. And then Nothing But a Name, which is another kind of darker song on here, but does have some of those kind of bluesy and jazzy elements, especially in those kind of guitar leads, which I think are actually done in sync with some delicate vocals from Myles to kind of make this unique sounding overall melody, especially in that intro. That's kind of what I'm talking about. So yeah, I mean, musically, this album's perfect. It really is. I have no complaints. It's flawless. I don't like giving scores when I do favorite albums videos because I've just been so skewed at this point from nostalgia with these albums. And this is also just musically so far. I haven't even touched on lyrics, production, and everything else and all the other ideas that make this album such an amazing album, one of my favorites. Lyrically, this album is absolutely phenomenal. Myles proves himself to be one of the just absolute best songwriters in modern music today on this album. There are several different themes throughout the album, but the overall idea of the album is that it centers on Myles' dad passing when he was a kid. He passed in 1974, which in the Chinese calendar is the year of the tiger. And it's just amazing how much Myles really does pour his heart and soul into the words that he sings on this album. And despite having this overall umbrella of a sort of concept, there's still several different themes in these songs that are explored. For one, the title track and Turning Stones kind of sees Myles kind of trying to still have hope and maintaining hope even throughout the struggle that he's enduring because of his father passing, obviously. Also, Love Can Only Heal does that. I mean, you could just obviously read the title in that case. But for me, the best songs lyrically on here are the ones that kind of go for some darker themes. Like Blind Faith is a lyrical highlight for me on this album. This song sees Myles like pretty openly struggling with faith, talking about praying to your silent king, and actually, I mean, obviously the title, but saying faith can be blind, it cannot justify. I know these ideas of faith relate to his father's passing. I'm not exactly sure in what capacity, so I don't want to assume anything, but there is that line in the bridge where he says, "Is it worth it in the end to never see my face again?" And then the line that precedes that is, "Never compromise your faith." I love how much Myles really did pour out his heart and soul into this album, into these lyrics. Devil on the Wall, too, another one where he kind of noticeably struggles with faith. There's a line where he literally says, "If there is a God, why did he take my father's soul?" That song overall kind of manifests a bit more of this kind of anxiety, these anxious feelings that Myles was probably having. Also, Nothing But a Name, which is another one that's probably pretty self-explanatory just from the title, in a sense that Myles, I guess, kind of never really knew his father because he was so young when he died. And then on the flip side, on the more cheerful side, there is the song Mother, where Myles sings directly to his mother, but also in a way that's a bit more relatable and not as specific. Like just the overall main line of this song when he says, "When all hope is left to die, a mother's love survives." This is obviously a very personal and intimate song to Myles, and there is that part in the bridge of the song where he actually sings directly to his mother, but lines like the one I just mentioned make this song also just that much more relatable. And of course, it has to be said, the amazing production on this album. It's the perfect balance between being clear and audible, but being a bit unrefined as well. I think it really contributes to the escapism and the mood of this album. And then on personal notes for me and why I still love this album so much and why it is so meaningful to me, I mean, when it came out, I was kind of in a rough relationship. Definitely a relationship that I should have ended way before I actually did. But, I was young, didn't really know any better, but I gotta say, this album was one of the albums that really, kept me going in that time, despite how unhappy I was. And there's also just the fact that this album came out in March, and here in the Midwest, which is a very seasonal area of the world, this album it perfectly encapsulates March for me. It's kind of right at that midpoint between winter and summer. It's technically still winter for the majority of the month, but it's just starting to get warm out. We're starting to get more sunny days. And this is after the shit show of winters that we have here in Chicago. And as a result, this is my go-to album to revisit throughout March. If it's a beautiful sunny day, then those kind of more escapist type tracks like Turning Stones and Ghost of Shangri-La especially resonate with me. But then if it's a cold, gloomy day, then I find myself kind of identifying more with the darker songs on here, like Blind Faith, Nothing But a Name, Haunted by Design. And then there's the tracks where it really doesn't matter what it looks like outside. I'm just loving it either way, which Love Can Only Heal, biggest one, also Great Beyond. It's the perfect March album. It really is, because no matter what it looks like outside, there's something here that fits it. And overall, this album has a lot more hope to it than doubt and darkness. And that also is pretty identifiable as far as the month of March, in a sense that we know that the warmth and the pleasant weather is coming. So it's kind of like a soundtrack of hope in that sense. I think the two closing tracks on here, Songbird and One Fine Day, best exemplify that feeling. So yeah, I think I've nerded out about this album for long enough. If you're an Alter Bridge fan or just a hard rock fan or even maybe a metalhead and you haven't heard this album, I highly recommend it, especially if you kind of want to try broadening your musical tastes. Because if that's your goal, to experiment in kind of new styles such as this album, and you listen to this album and you don't like it, then there's no hope. And this style's just not for you. Because this is just such an amazing album. It really is. It is profoundly inspired. It is beautifully written, beautifully arranged, beautifully produced. It's wonderfully performed. It's all there. It really is. So, yeah, totally give it a shot. And if you have heard the album, then definitely comment below your thoughts on it. And if you have any responses to anything I've talked about in this video, or if you have anything that I've missed. Also, feel free to hit the subscribe button for more rock and related content. I also got my Instagram, Spotify, and Threads links in the description of the video. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Peace.